Right, good morning, political junkies. What better place to be than Iowa, talking about political discourse and being here as a part of our run-up to the caucus series. My name is Pete Damiano. I direct the University of Iowa Public Policy Center, and really want to thank you all both for coming out, but also caring about a topic like this, because I think this is so important to our democracy and everything that we do. The topics that we're going to be covering today, campaign finance, redistricting in the media, and the impact on discourse, obviously could each take up, an entire semester's class. I warned them last night that there's a lot of pressure on each of the panels to be able to cover a lot of material in a very short amount of time. But obviously, we'll only be able to touch on certain aspects. But what we really want to do is then also engage in some dialogue with the people that are here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Public Policy Center, we are primarily a research center in the central administration of the university in the Office of Vice President for Research and Economic Development. And our primary job is to do the collection and dissemination of research to help inform policymakers and public about the most challenging issues that we face. I myself am a health policy researcher, so I've been having a lot of fun with the Affordable Care Act. And you can imagine the issue about political discourse and the ACA is also a challenging one. Obamacare, for those of you who don't know it by that name, where we try to share that information amidst both left and right dialogue about Obamacare that become real challenging in terms of trying to get that information out to people in a way that's credible. And so that's our challenge at the university. Our job is to create knowledge and disseminate that in a way and share information from across the political spectrum, both with students, policymakers, and the public. And that's what this event and our whole, what we call our community engagement mission of the Public Policy Center is all about. And so again, thank you for really being a part of that. When you talk about political discourse, there's one other aspect that I think is really fascinating, and that's the issue of what some would call civility. And we've had a lot of discussion. We did a symposium like this 4 years ago, also running up to the last caucuses. And among our planning committee, we had a lot of discussion about the topic of civility and where that sort of plays in the political discourse spectrum. Because some would say, well, we need to all sit around and politely talk, and others would say, well, you do need people pushing at the edges. And we wouldn't have had the civil rights movement, and we wouldn't have women's rights movement and things like that if you didn't have people that were pushing us out of our comfort zone. But at the same time, you then need those of us who can then sit around the table with an evidence base and actually hash out where we need to go and where we want to go, and policymakers that are receptive to doing that. And I think that's really a big part of the mission of the university and in our view, the University of Iowa. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bruce Harold, who is the 21st president of the University of Iowa, and I know he believes that it's a role of the university to provide an official welcome.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. It's an amazing venue. I think it's very appropriate to have this conference today, this symposium here in this facility in this great historic building. Great to see you again, Congressman. And I must say, before I even start, go Hawks, big event coming up tomorrow. For 25 years, the Public Policy Center here at the university has played a very vital role. I think Pete captured it quite well, basically saying it's all about doing the hard work to get the research and facts into the public domain around very important issues. And that's what the Public Policy Center is focused on. It's got 6 areas that it's focused on today. And one of them that we will pick on today is the issue of public discourse about public discourse. And I think this season is very, very important for us to identify the campaign financing, redistricting, as well as the role that the media plays. Those 3 issues couldn't be any more important. And trying to get the discussion around the role that they play into a fact-based discussion, I think is really important. I'm reminded, as I've been building teams over the years, we send it, I think he's right, in the sense that we not only need to come together and talk in a civil way about these issues, and I think that's where the facts start coming into this, and the real underlying data. At the same time, we do need to understand that it's important to push out on the edges. So tensions can get a little testy. But I think the spirit of this, as I've been building teams over the years, I've used a phrase that I think fits quite well. I'm sure what's going to happen here today, which is let's bite each other in the nose, face to face, around the issues, and have a civil discourse. It could be testy. That's the biting process. But let's don't stab each other in the back. Let's try to get on as a common framework and see if we can understand at least what our differences are around these important issues. And so with that, I really appreciate being here to set this up. I think it's a very interesting time as we launch here in Iowa at the beginning, and it's been going on, it seems like now for months already, the campaign process in the United States. But the three issues here of the role that money plays, the media plays, and this ever incessant ability to sort of redistrict things, I think three vitally important topics. And I hope you have a lot of fun biting each other in the nose and not doing any stabbing in the back. That's an American process. So with that, I will wish you all the best. And thank you very much to the Congressman as well as all the speakers that are going to be here, because they've taken a lot of time out of their schedules to come and present their thoughts and have fun. I look forward to listening and learning about the output of these three very, very important issues. Pete, thank you to your team for doing this. I know it's not easy. I know you think it's your job, but your team is doing, you get into appropriately testy issues, which is what it's all about. And you do it in a high-class way, so I want to thank you and thank your team. Thank you.
Thank you, President Harrell. Next, with some opening remarks, is Representative Dave Lotzak. And again, to have a member of Congress be more appropriate for something like this, I can't imagine. A former political science professor, obviously has both studied this and then has been living what the impact of these issues are, and we've asked him just to provide a few insights from his experience about the issues of redistricting and campaign finance and how that he's seen played in political discourse. Representative Lotzak.
Time do I be? 40 minutes?
Exactly.
I often say that it's really, you do so at your peril when you ask me to speak as a former college professor turned congressman. The only thing worse is if I were a senator. And being in a Senate chamber is always a little bit scary for me, I have to tell you. I'm not going to filibuster. I'm just going to do my best to say a few things before you get going. Thanks, Pete, for having me, and all those folks who put this together. It is just such an appropriate time to be talking about these issues. And as a former political scientist who didn't study the American system quite so much, but has experienced the American system a lot the last 9 years, going into 10 years, I will tell you that I do miss, sort of these kinds of conferences from time to time, because this is one of several things that I get to do today. I get to talk and hang out a little bit, then I have to rush off and do a bunch of other things. I would like to spend more time here, but I have 24 counties. I do live in Johnson County now, but I have a pretty huge congressional district, so I have to get a lot of places today. I'll end up in Fort Madison. I told my wife I had no idea what time I'm going to get home tonight. But I will be home tomorrow night in time for the football game. I'll say go Hawks as well. But look, I just want to say a couple of things here, a few things. These are different issues that are really, really significant, and I think that you'll find out today from the experts. One of the things I miss about not being an academic any longer is that I've gone from sort of dealing with things systematically to dealing with things anecdotally. And it's very frustrating that the best I can do is to be anecdotal, because I don't have the time to read this stuff, that you folks are producing and that's going to be presented today. So the real experts are the ones that are going to be talking a little bit. But I can at least talk from experience, which, again, as a social scientist, isn't as satisfying for me when it comes to presenting evidence as it would be if I were still a social scientist. That qualification, that caveat out of the way, I'll say some things anyway. But here's the deal. I'm just going to get on the list of these three things, just make a couple of different points. Campaign finance, post Citizens United. Not to get overly opinionated about this or anything, but The fact of the matter is, I can understand why the Supreme Court made the decision it made. If you believe that money is speech, and if you believe that speech should be unlimited. But my own view, for what it's worth, is that another consideration should have weighed much more heavily on the 5 justices who I believe ruled incorrectly, and that is, what is the effect of all of this on our body politic in the United States? What are the potential effects? There's no way to know everything that was going to happen as a result of Citizens United. But we do know that the more money is brought to bear on the process by any given individual or entity, the more likely it is that it's going to skew democracy in that process in America. And my own view is that wasn't sufficiently taken into account. So what you have is a situation now where you have folks on different sides of an issue, often pouring tons of money into the process. And you know, we have single issue politics that's been exacerbated. We have individuals who have a lot of money, or brothers, as the case may be, who have a lot of money, and can influence the process on both sides of the political aisle, folks. Let's not, you know, fool ourselves about this, because both sides understand that they have to do this to survive and to get their folks elected, to get their voices heard, and all the rest. But especially when we have money that's so ideologically driven, then of course that's going to drive wedges between us, and I don't think it's a good thing myself for politics in America, and certainly not for discourse. Media. I've had some interesting experiences myself recently with social media. If anyone just wants to go to my Facebook page, you can find out. You know, a lot of people have been talking about my vote on the Syrian refugees on Facebook. And very little of it has been complimentary. That's kind of how it is in this job. You know that when you vote, you're going to tick off somebody on either side, no matter what. But I would say that it's not a good sign when we have folks on both sides of the aisle, you know, blaring and blasting headlines on social media and demonizing the people they disagree with, whether it's a left-wing blog demonizing people in the Republican Party or 47 Democrats, as the case may be, and in the process spewing disinformation as well, or whether it's on the right doing the same thing to people on the left or some of their own folks on the right. It doesn't serve the purpose of trying to have some kind of civil discourse and ultimately trying to get things done in America. It just doesn't contribute in a positive way. I understand why people do it. Look, I mean, I recall when Bill Clinton withdrew the nomination of Lonnie Lanier. Some of you may remember that. I was incensed. This is horrible. This guy is just caving in, you know. He's giving up on his principles and all the rest. I was a 10-year full professor, and I could feel that way. And I could worry about my job and all the rest. Okay, maybe I was only associate at that point, but nonetheless, I was tenured. You know, I could spout off and do all that. That was way before social media got crazy. But the fact of the matter is, when we set up into these different camps and literally tear each other apart, it doesn't really contribute to the cause of moving this country forward and trying to get things done. And of course, you know, all you have to turn to Fox or MSNBC and you see the same things all the time. Now, I watch those shows. I watch all those channels when I have the opportunity, which isn't very often, but because I do personally want to get a different feel for things from the different sides of the issue. But nonetheless, I think it's fair to say that there's not a lot of talking to each other out there when it comes to the media, especially social media. And then finally, redistricting. You know, I often say that this is drawing upon microeconomics. Politicians are nothing if they're not risk averse. You know what I mean? And you know what I'm talking about, all right? And by the way, before you say, oh, all politicians want to do is get reelected, do keep in mind that if I don't get reelected, I can't be in the Congress and I can't try to do the things that you want me to do, okay? So when I say risk averse, it's not that politicians only think about reelection when they take votes or when they do what they do. But that certainly is very important to all of us politicians. There's no question about that. And when I say risk averse, people don't want to lose elections. They want to get reelected. And so you're in a situation with redistricting, and by the way, maybe somebody's going to talk about Florida today, I don't know, but the Supreme Court there just ruled on a map that is really going to change things significantly there in at least 5 districts. It's going to be quite fascinating to see what happens. But the redistricting, which isn't like Iowa, which is the rest of the country, essentially almost the rest of the country, is a very political process. We all know that. State legislatures, governors, whatever the case, make that decision. But what we have now is a situation, and I contributed to this in some ways because of my victory in 2006. I'm the first one that did. We have a situation where fewer and fewer congressional districts in America are at all competitive, all right? And so folks who work across the aisle don't exist as much as they used to do. And my district went from a so-called D+7 to a D+4, so it's more competitive. But as many of you know, I tried to work across the aisle before my district became more competitive because I think that's the right thing to do. That's what people tell me they want me to do. But when you have a redistricting situation where more and more of the districts are considered safe, it only makes sense that the folks in those seats who are risk averse and want to get reelected are going to continue to operate in a situation where they're going to try to please their base more than anything else because they don't want a primary challenge, okay? I just talked to David Bratt the other day, former small college professor, going to beat Eric Cantor in that primary, right? I just talked to him. I said to him, how can anybody be farther right than you, Dave? He has a primary challenge in his Virginia seat, okay? Now, I don't know what he did wrong, you know, to deserve a primary challenge, but this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, folks. And that makes it harder for us to come together and get things done because there are fewer of us. You know, I joked to Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania when the leadership battle was going on. He was on Meet the Press with David Bratt, actually, that one day. And I said to Charlie, I'm going to vote for you for Speaker, Charlie, because you're so reasonable, but just don't tell Nancy Pelosi that because I haven't told her that yet, you know. But I mean, and I was joking, obviously, but nonetheless, you know, there are folks on both sides of the aisle who do try to get things done, but it makes it difficult when we have the redistricting situation that we have, where it polarizes us. Now, some of what I said today may very well be challenged by the experts. I'm not going to be here to hear that. Please be in touch with me, and I want to hear from folks, and I do want to hear what the experts have to say, because next time I give a few-minute speech like this, and I only regret it couldn't be 40 minutes, but the next time I give a speech like this, I'll stand corrected and I'll modify my remarks. But thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This is a good time for folks in the back if you want to come in and find the seats. As we prepare for our first panel, I do want to just do a quick thank you. President Harold mentioned our great team, and we do have a great team at the Public Policy Center we're very fortunate to have. And some of you have been in contact with Leslie Gannon, who's our Community Engagement Coordinator. We did a lot to put this all on. In addition, Alex Sokowski is here, who does all of our IT support and is essential for everything that we're doing. Christy Fitzpatrick, the Assistant Director of the Center, is here. And without all of them, we would never be able to do all of this. In addition, one of the things we really like to do, being in the central administration of the university, is being able to reach out and collaborate with folks, I mean, basically across campus, but also across the community. And so we have some financial co-sponsors in the Department of Political Science, Communication Studies, Journalism and Mass Communication, the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies, and the School of Urban Regional Planning. We have a couple non-university partners that you may have seen up here in the Hoover Presidential Library and the Hoover Foundation. And we recently did a great event with them on the history of the Iowa caucuses, which was a lot of fun. And Kerry Covington, who I see over there from the Department of Political Science, did a great job of emceeing that event. And it was just fascinating. That will be coming up on C-SPAN at some point, and if you get a chance, I would really highly recommend that you see it. It was a great capture of the activist types who've been involved in running some of the previous campaigns, going all the way back to Jimmy Carter. And Tim Kraft was just great talking about Carter's campaign back in 75, 76. A long way from where we are now. I think he said he had $18,000 for the entire fall campaign to deal with everything in Iowa at that time. And then people that are covering the event in the media as well. As important, we've got a number of in-kind sponsors who, without them helping us get the word out, many of you wouldn't be here. Those include the Associate Provost for Outreach and Engagement Office, Progress Iowa, the College Republicans, the Johnson County Republican Central Committee, the No Labels Iowa Hawkeye Chapter, the Office of the Provost, the Iowa Democratic Party, Johnson County, the 50/50 and 2020 group, the Johnson County League of Women Voters, the Iowa Republican Party and Democratic Party at the state level help get the word out on things not as official ones, and the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. And so, as you can tell, broad range of support from across the political spectrum, because this topic is not a left or a right or a Democratic or Republican issue. It's something that if we really want to move our country forward on many of the most challenging issues, we need to be able to do this. I mentioned about Obamacare, but it doesn't matter if it's the Affordable Care Act or a tough transportation issue or Wall Street reform or No Child Left Behind, whatever it is. All of those are really big issues. They're not right or wrong. They're not good or bad. You've got good aspects of them. You've got bad aspects. A lot of it's the implementation of how it is, and we need to be able to tease out what's working, what isn't, how do we make it better. And if we can't get to that level of discussion, we're never going to be able to move our country forward really in the way that we need to. So with that, and also one last thing, I also want to thank our planning committee. And we had many members from across the university. Many of the people I just mentioned were a part of that planning committee and really helped us to come up with a diverse group of speakers. We reached out to people everywhere from the Cato Institute and Heritage and Citizens United all the way over to groups that might be considered further on the left to try to invite them in to talk about some of these issues. And I think the people you see we've ended up with, I'll say, very fortunately ended up with, will provide some really great information on the process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Master of Ceremonies for the day, Tracy Osborne. And Tracy is a political science professor, but also directs the Politics and Policy Research Program at the Public Policy Center. And this is her first year, and she's done a tremendous job helping to organize all this. Let me welcome Tracy.
I'm short, so I've got to move this. All right, I am going to, okay, or it doesn't move. The other option. All right. Good morning. I am here simply to welcome you and say that we really appreciate you all coming. It's really nice to look out into the audience, having been mostly audience participants from the Public Policy Center before, to look out and see people I recognize from past political discourse symposia, from other events at the Public Policy Center, to see students that I recognize who have come in from classes, and to see so many people from the community who've come just to learn. We were thrilled to have this group of people here. There were actually some of them I emailed that thought, oh gosh, they'll never come, they're kind of fancy. And a very fancy group, you can see. But they said yes, and we're actually really excited about coming to Iowa in December because they're very passionate about these particular issues that they're going to discuss today. Just a couple of very quick items of sort of how this is going to work. The moderators will introduce the panelists to you so you know a little bit more about them. And they're each going to do a bit of instructing, but also describing some features of these current problems in political discourse that we're focusing on today. So we need for this really to be a mix of information coming from all different sides, but also an experience where you can ask questions and you can debate amongst the group. And so if you look at the end of the aisle, you'll see there are cards and pens. Just because of the acoustics of the room, if you do have questions, we have a long questions period in each panel, you can write the question down and submit it that way, which will make it a little bit easier for us to get the questions to the panel. So if you're wondering why there's random pens on the floor, that's why. Anyway, I really hope that you guys enjoyed being here. We're so delighted to see this huge crowd. It's really exciting. So welcome, and go ahead and get underway.